Hello my quilting friends, Leah Day here with a new sit-down quilting video. I'm working on this little sample and I am stitching stippling, and I'm doing this so I can test and see what it's like to quilt with fleece as my backing fabric. I've been really intrigued by this. It's really super soft, really nice fabric. You can find it at most craft supply stores. And what I've done is I have fused a piece of French fuse to the back of the fleece, and that stopped it from being too stretchy. And then I have Quilter's Dream Poly as my batting. So I am still using batting with this, even though the fleece is pretty, thick and squishy too. And that's just making the quilt really squishy and the back super soft. Now, what I'm doing to test this is I want to see how this feels when I quilt it with stippling on a large scale and on a smaller scale. So this is really just a practice sandwich, kind of a test to see how it's going to work. And I really think this is a good idea whenever you're working with a new material, whenever you're trying something new, or even whenever you're just planning the designs to stitch on your next quilt. Make up about a fat quarter-size practice sandwich like this and just start quilting the designs that you're thinking onto that practice sandwich, and it's going to really help you test your design. It's also going to help you test your materials. If there was any kind of issue going on with the fabric or the batting or the fleece on the back, then I would be able to tell here off the real quilt. The only thing I would be losing here is just a pretty fat quarter, and that would be it. So one thing that you can see as I stitch stippling is I stitch it in this row, and I've reached this opposite edge of my quilt, so I'm going to wiggle my way down. I'm going to rotate the whole quilt around, because for me, working from left to right is what feels really natural. That just is, I don't know, it's just the direction that really works for my brain. So I always like to be wiggling from left to right, generally anywhere on a quilt. If I can't quilt from left to right, it's not the end of the world, but I really like for it to feel natural and to feel easy. And so I always rotate the quilt and see if I can possibly quilt in this direction. It just makes it that much easier, and it makes my stitches look that much better. So far, I'm not seeing any issue with quilting with the fleece on the back. It does feel squishier under my hands, but I think if I was using like wool in the middle here, it would be even squishier. So I'm kind of glad I used this rather thin polyester batting in the middle. Now, I did another test here. This was earlier, and I did not use batting here. So I took the fleece, and I attached the French fuse, and then I just layered fabric on top of it. And it works. You certainly can stitch through it, but I do want to tell you, it has a different feel to it. It's almost like the fabric is kind of crinkly, and it has a stronger fabric-y kind of texture, where this feels more like a normal quilt, where the stitches are kind of on top and the fabric is flat. This feels like the cotton fabric is kind of bumpy and lumpy and a little crinkly. When I showed this to my dad, we both were like rubbing on the quilts and seeing which one we liked better. While this was different, Dad said he liked the texture, and it was just something different. So it wasn't a bad thing. So I think it's worth trying. If you don't have batting, but you do have fleece, if you have a pretty nice fleece for a back of a quilt, then you could try it that way. If you wanted a really super squishy quilt, then I think fleece plus batting is a good way to try it. Now, you might be wondering why I decided to use the French fuse. Mostly that was to control the stretch of the fleece. It is a stretchy material, and that's another test to run to see if you really need that or not. I think some sort of interfacing is a good thing on weird fabrics like this, but that's totally up to you. So I'm going to get back to my stippling here, and I want to show you how to expand this design and make it really big. So let's say you really wanted very minimal quilting on your quilt. Well, basically the key is just to add more space between the lines of the design. So right now I'm stitching stippling, and it's about finger width apart. Those lines are about a finger width apart. Now let me expand it so that they're 2 finger widths apart. that will be a little bit more than an inch. So to do this, I need to really focus on keeping those lines spaced wider apart and to make bigger movements. So I'm going to stretch all the way out and go all the way up here. And it's a much larger movement with my hands. I'm really spreading out my hands so that there's more than enough space for the quilt to move. And already I'm off the edge of the quilt. You know, I've kind of run out of quilt to work with here. So really, whenever you are trying to make really big shapes and you want to quilt a quilt very minimally, the thing to focus on is just expanding that space, you know, 2 finger widths, 3 finger widths, and that's what you want to focus on in order to make that design much bigger. So that's it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed learning a little bit more about quilting with fleece and quilting stippling. Learn more about the Grace Unique that I'm working on and find all of the videos we've shared so far on my YouTube channel. Until next time, let's go quilt.